those of you who followed from my prior video on the edge treatment for my top, I chose the single bead edging because it matches well the beading that I added in the apron. So while I did like the beading that had the 3 beads on the actual exterior of the top, I think I'll do that at another time for another piece of furniture I'll build. So with this single bead accenting and replicating the bead down here, let me show you how we built it. For those of you wanting plans, this is my elaborate plans for the table. So I have my pieces for my apron cut. These are the 2 sides and these are the 2 ends. I've marked them, which side will go inside. So when I put my tenons, which I'm going to cut in these boards, I'm going to have 3/8 inch tenon offset. So I'm going to mark those on the end of this board. And then with the piece of chalk, I'm going to mark what portion of that I'll need to cut off. So this will be inset there, and then I'll come back and do a 1/2 inch inset there, and that will be my tenon of 3/8. Now I have this line marked for the distance of cut this way. Now I want to mark a 1/2 inch in here, and that's going to be the portion we're going to take off. So let's get that marked. So I've set my table saw to where this line here is the height of the blade, and this line here is the distance from the fence. So I have to do that minus the width of the kerf to make sure we don't cut over. So now let's cut these tenons. Now to be able to cut this last little lip here without cutting my fence, okay, so now we're going to attach the sacrificial fence. I just have a piece of MDF with my dovetail grooves in here, so my match fit dovetail clamps will fit nicely to hold this. So these will go in here. Get these to tighten down. Now, I'm going to push this all the way over and cut that last little bit off for my tenons. Alright, so let me explain why my pieces, my tenons, only have 1 cheek. Because in this apparatus and this structure build, I am making this with a flush mount apron. So the apron is going to be flush to the front because I'm going to put a decorative piece that's going to go across the leg and the apron. So what I need to have done is have this mounted so close to the edge that I couldn't cut a double cheek tenon. So I'm cutting a 1 cheek, and this piece will fit in like here, and my tenon will run the length of this, offset enough to where I have enough offset for this not to make it any weaker by being too close to the edge. Here I'm just taking my shoulder plane and just smoothing out the tenons for nice fit. So this piece will fit in here like this. So what we need to do is mark the back side of this tenon that's going to be going here so we can cut the mortise. So I'm going to lay this guy down flat. So now I have this flat to my workbench. I'm going to come back with my marking gauge, drop it on here, lower that till it meets there, and then set that as the depth. Alright, so now that line is going to be the depth from the top of this. So that's the back edge, and I'm going to make a 3/8 inch mortise. As long as I have this edge set up, my 3/8 inch bit will be precise there. So now I'll go around and create the same cut lines for each of the legs, and since there may be a small variance in each depth, I set my marking gauge for each piece and mark it to make sure we have a good fit. Now it's on to the mortising jig. So I get it out and I get it set up and ready for my cut, and put each of the legs into the mortise jig, get it set over to where I have the right depth of cut for it, and I cut my 1/2 inch deep mortise, 2 sides on each leg. So after making the cut for the mortise, let me show you what it looks like. So we just pop it out of the jig, and there you go. It's about a 5 inch long, 1/2 inch deep, 3/8 inch from the side. Okay, after I cut all the mortises and I fit my apron loosely into my legs, you can see I have my legs marked where I'm going to do tapers on the inside of the legs. So let's take a look at the top. You can see we just have our mortises just loose fit into the apron, so we'll get that flushed up here and get on to the next step. So this is a test fit of the apron into the mortise, and you can see we have a square edge on the apron and a round over in the mortise because of the router bit. So what we're going to do is round over the square corner on the apron to make that fit. So a quick way to do this is make a little sawed line, just enough for a place to have a cut for your relief from your chisels, and just round it over a bit and you're good to go. So this is going to be the bottom of the table leg width. So I'm going to cut off this portion here and that portion there in 2 cuts to produce a taper. I have this green tape to designate this is 7 inches from the top. That's where my cut will begin. So it will come in here and all the way down to here to this line right here. And then we turn it and do it the same thing on this other side. So let's get our taper sled set up. So here's my taper jig. This is a very simple setup. So what I'm going to do is install some stop blocks on here. So the first thing that I do, since I have marked my 1 inch square from here to there is 1 inch, I set that right on the edge. And then I set down here where the cut is going to begin, just so I can feel that off the edge. So now I'm going to screw in a block right here to secure the bottom of this.
So take the stop block that supports the bottom of the leg and put a screw into it to prevent it from sliding down past that cut. Then I put one on the left side of the board, and I want to screw it down to prevent the board from flexing out or in any. And that one didn't quite go in straight, so let's move it up and start a new hole. There, it's a lot better. And then we may even have one up at the top.
So here's another way to secure your board. If you have a pair of these match fit clamps, you can do the same thing. You can put this in place, and you come over here and clamp these into place to hold this while you screw in your stop blocks. And so in this case, I'm making sure that my lip is just right there. Now, if you like to do this and want to set it up every time, you won't even need these stop blocks. But since I'm cutting 4 legs twice, I got 8 cuts. It's better to have stop blocks in addition to that, so I can easily pop them in and out.
So here's our cut. One time through on one side, we rotate the leg 90 degrees and cut the other side, and voila, we're done. Okay, that was a little fast. Let me show you regular speed. So we come in and we have the blade clamped down with stop block. It goes right barely into our cut there. And as we progress down, it goes all the way to the cut our board to 1 inch. There we go. We take it off, we stop the saw, we turn our piece, and then we cut the next side. So after we rotate the piece 90 degrees, we put it back in the clamp. It's up against the bottom stop block and up against the left stop block. And we reattach the clamps and we saw it again. We put it back on the sled and away we go. That's simple.
Okay, here's a dry fit after we've cut the taper on the legs. Now it has much more character to it, a little less boxy, has a lot better feel to the table that way. All right, so we're getting close. Now we're able to glue our end pieces together, get those set, and ready for the next step. Okay, so now we have a dry fit for our table, and we have our legs cut. And so in preparation for gluing our end pieces together and the total frame, we'll think ahead about how we're going to attach the table. In this case, I'm going to use Z-clips. So to use Z-clips, what I'm going to do is you have to have a slot on the inside edge of your pieces of the apron to be able to attach those to hold it to the top. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart and cut those into the sides now, because your biscuit cutter won't fit in this way because the table is too narrow.
Cutting the grooves for the Z-clips was easy. Put 2 pieces in, cut it, turn it around. Now it's time for the carcass glue up. We start with the aprons that are the short or the end pieces and glue those to the legs. We can get those nice and flat. So once those 2 pieces are glued and dried, then we'll glue up the 2 end pieces with the long aprons.
So got it out of the glue up. So we have one little ledge front that's a little bit higher, but we'll just plane that smooth because we're gonna come in here and cut the details. So we want our legs and sides to be all flush. So we'll just
Now it's time to glue the front aprons or the long part aprons to the 2 end pieces we had glued up previously.
I came up to my church wood shop because there's one reason. I can lay my whole table up against the fence and all the legs are supported. Well, I could probably do this in my home shop. I just felt it'd be a little bit safer and get a little more accuracy doing it here. So now it's time to cut the groove in here for our decorative beading piece.
I highly suggest you always do a sample or trowel cut. So I have a piece of the same mahogany that I use to do a trowel cut to make sure I have the depth correct. So after I dialed in the exact width of my little dado cut, I put on my table saw and cut a 1/4 inch depth to the same grooved width that I needed for my beading to make sure it go around all sides. You got to get this right. You only get one chance at it.
To get my custom fit for my beading, I'm just going to put a couple of strokes of the hand plane. Nice curls to get that to fit. And with that action, that should be enough to dial in our fit. There we go.
So after the hand plane, I get my beading up. I got a perfect fit, nice and tight on both sides.
Okay, now comes the detail of fitting these pieces in after we got the right depth cut. And so we have our corners. And so I mark on the inside here the bevel that I want. So I need to cut this angle right there. So I'm going to do the sneak up method. So just cut a little bit long and just sand down to the edge. This is the 45-degree cut. And so we're going to cut this a little bit long. All right, so we have a dry fit of our beading around here, so you can see it matches this beading up here. Looks rather nice. So we've got all our pieces dry fitted around. Next step is to glue it in. Now for this table, I used 2 different finishes. On the top, I used the General Finishes Armor Seal, nice satin color. I wanted to be able to show off the pecan. For the carcass, I used spray lacquer. Because I had this beading effect here and I didn't want any dribbles or runs or overruns on here by trying to brush it on and get it exactly the right thin, spraying was the best option. For those of you who wonder, so where do you get such wonderful ideas? Well, a lot of times I just think of them or I daydream, or sometimes they're nightmares. But in this particular case, this beading on this apron came right out of the April 2021 issue of Fine Woodworking magazine. So they built the table out of that and I said, I'm gonna have to try that. So here it is. So if you liked our video, give me a thumbs up. Want to see more of our projects? Consider subscribing down below. And as usual, come back and see me real soon.